Senator from Oklahoma.
President Obama, in December of 2015, signed the Every Student Succeeds Act after it had passed this body with an overwhelming bipartisan support. 85 of 100 senators supported the bill. Wall Street Journal called the Every Student Succeeds Act the largest devolution of federal control to the states in a quarter century. It also had the support of governors, state legislators, chief state school officers, school district superintendents, local school boards, principals, teachers' unions, who all agreed that we need to replace No Child Left Behind. The core of that education reform in the Every Student Succeeds Act was to restore to the states local control. Not just control for them, but they would have the responsibility and the authority for things like school accountability, teacher evaluation, student evaluation. It's very clear. In fact, the Every Student Succeeds Act said some things that very specifically. States are solely responsible for choosing which standards to adopt. The Secretary cannot mandate, direct, or control state standards. The Secretary of Education cannot require, coerce, or incentivize states to adopt Common Core state standards. States are responsible for choosing what assessments to adopt. The Secretary of Education cannot mandate, direct, or control state assessments for education. States can design their own systems for holding schools accountable and decide which schools to identify for school intervention and support. The Secretary cannot add new requirements or criteria on state accountability systems not in the law. State and local school districts decide what strategies they will implement to fix identified schools without federal interference. The Secretary of Education cannot prescribe how states and local school districts improve those schools. Congress passed that clear education law to take power out of Washington, D.C., and the Department of Education and the Secretary of Education and hand it back to the states. But 5 months after the bill was signed, the Obama administration changed their mind and released regulations to take back school decision-making and accountability in direct violation of the law. 85 of 100 of us agreed our passion is for every school district, every parent, every state to take care of every child. That no child would be left behind by switching to local control rather than federal centralized control. But when this new rule was put out by the Obama administration, they reinterpreted that clear law. Let me tell you what they said actually in the rule. In the rule, they dictated to states the consequences for schools that don't annually test at least 95% of their students. They prescribed to the states and school districts how they would intervene and improve schools that don't exit from this identification process of being an underperforming school. They limited how states may measure school quality or student success based on four-year graduation rates. They defined how much weight states must afford to non-test-based indicators in their accountability systems. This regulation prescribed the long-term goals and measurements of progress that states would use for their student subgroups. This new regulation prescribed when schools may exit from comprehensive support based on improvement. This new regulation mandated that states comply with specific Washington, D.C. created requirements instead of letting the school district or the state determine how best to proceed on those requirements. This new regulation limited how states award school improvement funding to school districts and schools. This new regulation added a new and burdensome reporting requirement every 4 years on states and local school districts that will drive up compliance costs and will divert resources away from students in the classrooms in direct violation of what we passed. This new regulation requires states to establish a statewide definition for ineffective teacher, requiring a statewide system of evaluation, controlled by D.C. This new regulation limits how students are scored when they've exited from special education. This new regulation controls how the school report cards are even created and how long they are. This is what we were exiting from with No Child Left Behind. We said in that vote for Every Student Succeeds, Washington, D.C. should not do this. This rule directly violated the spirit and the letter of the law and will put the new Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, in charge of school evaluation, teacher evaluation, and student success. That's not her role or the intent of this law when we passed it, regardless of who is the Secretary of Education. Our intent was to provide maximum flexibility for the states and the parents. The rule is central control from Washington, D.C. It's essential we stop this rule right now. While some of my colleagues have said, let's just wait and we'll do regulations and we'll unwind some of this, they're basically admitting the Trump administration will fix what the Obama administration overreach was. I understand that statement. I think there will be some unwinding in regulations, but here's why it must be done right now. 2 reasons. One is when we do this right now with the Congressional Review Act, we settle this forever, that no administration ever, as long as this law is in place, can repromulgate a rule and turn right back around and say, no, Washington, D.C. is going to control teacher evaluation, student success evaluation, and school evaluation. This ends that forever. The second thing is, right now, schools in Oklahoma have already diverted resources in their administration, and they're filling out forms that are due to Washington, D.C. in April to fulfill this new requirement that was put down by the administration. If we don't end this now, the districts in Oklahoma and in all of the states represented by this great Senate, their administrators will be working on forms for Washington, D.C. rather than educating children at home. Let's get those folks back in the classroom working on things that matter, not some form that no one's going to read in Washington, D.C. anyway. Why don't we allow our schools to focus on educating kids instead of filling out forms for the Secretary of Education? That's the reason we passed the Every Student Succeeds Act. I encourage this body to support H.J. Res 57 when it comes up. This will fix this overreach and will put a permanent marker down to say we meant it when Congress said to the administration, do not control local education. Let the states and the parents do it. With that, I yield back, and I'd recognize the absence of a quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.